The carriage swayed through the iron gates of Thornfield Hall like a ship entering hostile waters. Helena Ashford, Duchess of Ashford for exactly 17 days, kept her hands folded in her lap, and her gaze steady on the gray stone facade that was now, by law and by debt, her home. She had married the Duke in a ceremony so swift and cheerless that the ink on the settlement barely had time to dry before the ring was on her finger. Her father's gambling had sealed her fate. The Duke's cold acceptance had sealed his. He needed an heir, she needed a rescue. Neither pretended affection. The Duke himself rode ahead on a black gelding, never once glancing back at the carriage. He dismounted as the horses halted, his tall frame rigid in his greatcoat. When the footman opened the carriage door, he was there, not to offer his hand, but to observe her descent as if she were a parcel delivered to the wrong address. "Your Grace," she said, inclining her head. Her voice was low, measured. "Your Grace," he returned, the title on his lips a mockery of intimacy. His eyes, the color of winter flint, swept over her traveling dress. "There is something I wish you to see before you settle in." He led her not into the hall but around the eastern wing, down a flagstone path overgrown with moss, to a high brick wall with a rotting wooden gate. The hinges screamed as he pushed it open. Beyond stretched a garden, if one could call it that. Brambles coiled over fallen trellises. A dead elm stood at the center, its bark peeling like old skin. Weeds had conquered every bed, and the remains of a glass house glittered with shattered panes. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. "This is yours," the Duke said. "A wedding gift. I thought you might wish to cultivate something. The previous Duchess, my mother, let it fall to ruin. I imagine you will fare no better, but you did say you wished to be useful." The insult was wrapped in silk, but the blade cut clean. Helena felt the sting deep in her chest, but she did not let it reach her face. She looked at the desolation, at the one patch of soil where a single wild rose struggled against the shade. She walked forward, the hem of her gown darkening with damp, and knelt. She pressed her palm to the earth. It was cold, but not dead. Never dead. She rose and turned. "Thank you, Your Grace. I accept your gift with gratitude. I shall need a spade." The Duke's expression flickered confusion, then a hardening. He had expected tears, perhaps a plea. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Find your own spade, then. I'll not have the servants drawn away from their duties." He strode off, leaving her alone among the weeds. Helena stood there until the sound of his boots faded. Then she exhaled, a long, quiet breath. She was a baronet's daughter with no dowry and no illusions. She had survived her father's disgrace and her mother's illness. A dead garden was not a grave. It was an invitation. From the upper window of the library, the Duke watched her. He saw her kneel again, not in supplication, but in inspection. He saw her touch the struggling rose, and something in his chest tightened, an unwelcome sensation he quickly buried. He turned away, telling himself the chit would give up within a fortnight. But that night at dinner, he noticed there was a smudge of dirt still under her fingernail, and she did not bother to hide it. She ate her soup with the same quiet poise, and when he made a remark about the condition of her hands, she replied, "Dirt washes off, Your Grace. Neglect does not." He had no ready retort. The silence that followed was the first battle she had won. For the first week, Helena worked alone. She borrowed a rusted spade from a disused tool shed and began clearing the smallest corner of the garden. Her hands blistered, then calloused. The servants whispered. Mrs. Thorne, the housekeeper, looked on with pursed lips but said nothing outright. The footmen snickered when they thought she could not hear. Helena did not falter. She had learned in the years of her father's decline that dignity was a quiet fortress. Noise only weakened its walls. On the 8th morning, an old man appeared at the garden gate. He leaned on a cane, his back bent, but his eyes were sharp as a sparrow. "Your Grace," he said, "I'm Pember. Used to be head groundskeeper here before the Duke's mother dismissed me. I know this soil." He paused. "If you'll have me, I'll help." Helena studied him. "I cannot pay you. The Duke will not sanction wages for this garden." "I don't want wages," Pember said. I want to see something grow before I'm put in the ground myself." And so they began together. Pember taught her which roots could be saved, which brambles had to be burned, how to read the angle of the sun against the old walls. They turned the soil by hand, mixed in compost from the stables, and planted hardy seeds: turnips, cabbages, winter greens. Helena's pin money bought a few herb cuttings from the village: lavender, rosemary, thyme. Pember said they would survive. The Duke remained distant, but Helena felt his eyes on her often. At dinner he asked, "You spend hours out there. Do you imagine you can undo decades of ruin?" "I imagine I can try," she said. "Trying is not succeeding." "No, but failing to try is a certainty of failure." She buttered her bread. "Were you fond of your mother's garden, your Grace, before it fell to neglect?" His fork stilled. "My mother's garden is none of your concern." "You gave it to me. That makes it my concern." He did not answer, but later that week Sir Martin Thurlow came to pay a call. He was a neighbor, a baronet with a pleasant smile and a well-tailored coat. He found Helena in the garden, her sleeves rolled up, her hair escaping its pins. He did not hide his admiration. "Your Grace, this is extraordinary. The Duke must be so proud." "I doubt the Duke spares it a thought," Helena said, brushing soil from her hands. Sir Martin lingered too long. He offered to send his own gardener to assist. Helena refused with thanks that did not invite repetition. She was lonely, but not foolish. She knew that a married duchess accepting favors from a bachelor would light a scandal's fuse. The Duke, returning from a ride, saw Sir Martin's horse in the drive. He came around to the garden path and stood in the gateway, his riding crop tapping against his boot. "Thurlow, you are far from your own estate." "A neighborly visit, Ashford. Your wife is a marvel." The Duke's gaze moved to Helena, and something dark and possessive flickered there. "Indeed, and she is my wife." The emphasis was a blade. "I trust your visit is concluded." Sir Martin left with a bow that was almost a smirk. When he was gone, the Duke turned to Helena. "You will not receive him again without my presence." Helena lifted her chin. "I did not invite him today. I cannot control who calls, but I can control my own conduct. I suggest you do the same." She walked past him into the house, leaving him standing among the new green shoots that were just beginning to show. The storm came without warning, a black bruise of cloud that opened over Thornfield on a sweltering July afternoon. Wind tore through the garden like a cavalry charge. By the time Helena reached the gate, the new trellis she had built with Pember was splintered, the young plants flattened under hail and rain. The glasshouse's remaining panes were shattered entirely. She stood in the downpour, water streaming over her face, and let herself feel the loss. Then she bent down and began gathering what could be salvaged. Pember found her an hour later, soaked and shivering, clutching a handful of bruised lavender. "Your Grace, you'll catch your death." "Then I'll be buried in good soil," she said, but her voice trembled. The damage was severe. 3/4 of the plantings were destroyed. The Duke's steward reported the cost of repairs to the glasshouse would be more than £50, a sum the Duke would certainly not approve. That evening at dinner, the Duke said, "I hear the garden has met its end. A pity. I suppose you will retire indoors now and take up embroidery." Helena set down her spoon. "I have written to a horticulturist in London, a Mr. Fairchild, who writes treatises on winter gardens. I will purchase new seeds. The season is not over." "With what funds?" "My own," she said. "The allowance my father's solicitor arranged for me before the marriage. It is modest but sufficient." The Duke's jaw tightened. "You would spend your own money on that ruin." "It is my ruin, your Grace. You gave it to me." He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time there was no mockery in his gaze, only a kind of bewilderment, as if she were a cipher he could not crack. He said nothing more. Days later Sir Martin appeared again, this time carrying a basket of rare bulbs, tulips, hyacinths, imported from Holland. "I heard of your misfortune, your Grace. These might cheer your garden come spring." Helena was at the garden gate, her hands deep in fresh-turned earth. She did not rise. "Sir Martin, I cannot accept such a gift. It would be improper." "Improper a few flowers. From a gentleman not my husband while my husband is absent. Yes, improper." Her voice was firm. "I thank you for your kindness, but I must decline." Sir Martin's pleasant smile tightened. "The Duke does not deserve such loyalty. Everyone knows why he gave you this garden." Helena's heart stumbled, but she kept her expression placid. "I do not know what you mean, sir. Good day." He left, but his words lingered like a thorn. She did not ask Pember what he meant. She was not ready for the answer. She returned to the earth, her knuckles white on the spade. The Duke had been watching from the terrace, hidden by the stone balustrade. He saw the exchange, saw her refuse the basket, saw the baronet's stiff retreat. Something unclenched in his chest, then tightened again with a different ache. He had given her the garden to shame her, but she had turned it into something else, and now she was protecting it, protecting his name, while he had done nothing but sneer. He descended to the library and pulled out the old estate ledgers, the ones from his mother's time. There, buried in the accounts, was a record of the garden's former glory, and the exact specifications for the glass house his grandfather had built. He traced the faded ink with his finger, a plan forming that he would never admit aloud. Autumn arrived with a crispness that painted the surviving oaks in gold and crimson. Helena's garden, against all expectation, had rallied. The second planting thrived. Sturdy rows of kale, beets, parsnips, and late carrots. The herb corner was a fragrant tangle. A pumpkin vine had sprawled over a stone bench and produced 3 globes of deep orange. Pember swore he'd never seen such a yield in this soil, not in 40 years. One morning Helena went to the garden before breakfast and stopped short. The glass house, which had been a skeleton of rusted iron and broken glass, stood whole. New panes glittered in the low sun, and inside a small iron stove had been fitted with a chimney. There was a potting bench with fresh soil in the trays. No note, no announcement. She sought out the Duke in his study. He was at his desk, writing, and did not look up. "Your Grace, the glass house has been repaired." "Has it?" His pen did not pause. "I did not order it. The steward says no funds were released from the household accounts." He set down the pen. "Then perhaps the fairies did it." "I am not a fool," Helena said quietly. "Did you arrange this?" He leaned back, his expression a careful mask of indifference. "Why would I waste resources on a project I consider futile? The glass house was a liability. Perhaps the steward fears a lawsuit if it collapsed on you. I do not concern myself with such details." But his eyes told a different story. There was a flicker, a crack in the armor, and Helena saw it. She stepped closer. "Your mother's garden was once beautiful. I found her old planting journals in the library. She loved it, didn't she? Until she stopped loving anything." The Duke's face went pale. "You will not speak of my mother. You gave me her garden to humiliate me, but you also gave me the one place she loved. I wonder if you did it to hurt her memory as much as to hurt me." Her voice was gentle, not accusing. He stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "You know nothing. Nothing of what it was like to watch her waste away in that house, to see the garden die because she no longer had the will to tend it. I gave you the garden because I wanted you to fail. I wanted to prove that nothing good could grow here again. That hope was a weed." The confession hung between them, raw and unintended. He looked horrified at his own words. Helena did not step back. "And now?" He said nothing. His hands were shaking. He turned to the window, his back to her, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Now I do not know what I want." Helena left him there, the silence heavy as stone. But that evening the cook served a soup flavored with her rosemary and thyme, and the Duke ate every spoonful. He did not compliment it, but he did not criticize. For him, that was a banner of surrender. By late November, the garden was a quiet triumph. Helena and Pember had harvested the last of the root vegetables and stored them in the cool cellar. Shelves in the still room held jars of preserved plums from a rescued tree, dried herbs, pickled beets. The cook, A stout woman named Mrs. Bridges had become an unexpected ally, declaring that the Duchess's sage had saved the Michaelmas goose from mediocrity. The staff, once snickering, now touched their forelocks with genuine respect when Helena passed. Word spread beyond the estate. Tenants from the village, who had endured lean winters under the Duke's distracted management, came to the kitchen door to receive bundles of turnips and onions. Helena gave freely, never asking acknowledgement. She knew what it was to be hungry and proud. Sir Martin Thurlow called one last time, on a grey afternoon when the Duke was away on business. Helena received him in the drawing-room, with the door open and Mrs. Thorne seated in the corner as chaperone. Sir Martin's charm was wearing thin. He spoke of London gossip, of clubs and wagers, and then he leaned in. "Your Grace, you must know that your husband's gift was the talk of White's. He wagered 100 guineas with Lord Harrowby that you would not last a month in that garden, that you would weep and demand to return to town." Everyone laughed. The room tilted. Helena felt the blood drain from her face, but she kept her hands still. "You are certain of this?" "I was there. Harrowby was drunk and boastful. He said Ashford gave you a wasteland to put you in your place. The wager was the jest." Sir Martin's eyes gleamed with something like pity or triumph. "I thought you should know the truth." Helena rose, her movement so controlled it seemed rehearsed. "I thank you for the information, Sir Martin. You have been most informative. Now I must ask you to leave. I have preparations for Christmas to attend to." He left, and she stood in the drawing-room, staring at the portrait of the Duke's cold-eyed grandfather. A wager. The garden was not just an insult. It was a public humiliation, a sport for gentlemen's amusement. She had labored for months, bled into that soil, and all the while he had been waiting for her collapse with money riding on it. The Duke returned at dusk. She met him in the hall. "Is it true that you wagered 100 guineas with Lord Harrowby that I would fail in the garden?" He stopped mid-step. The color rose to his cheeks, then faded. He opened his mouth, but no denial came. "Who told you?" "Sir Martin. He heard it from Harrowby. Was it true?" The silence was his answer. It stretched until Helena felt it would choke her. "I see." She turned and walked toward the stairs. "Helena," he used her name for the first time, and it sounded like a wound. She did not turn back. "The garden will feed your household this Christmas, Your Grace. You have won nothing, but I have lost more than you will ever understand." She ascended the stairs, her back a straight line of unshatterable dignity. The Dowager Duchess, Lady Margaret Ashford, arrived 3 days before Christmas with 2 maids, a lapdog, and an expression of terminal disapproval. She was the Duke's aunt, a formidable widow who had managed the family's reputation for decades. She had not attended the wedding, deeming it a sordid arrangement, and her inspection of the new Duchess was foretold to be merciless. Helena greeted her with impeccable courtesy and a calm she did not feel. The Dowager swept through the hall, her eyes missing nothing. "I shall see this famous garden. My nephew's letters have been strangely silent on the matter." The garden, even in winter, was a testament. The beds were dormant but neat, mulched with straw. The glass house glowed with the warmth of the stove, inside which forced lettuce and herbs grew in pots. The Dowager stood in the gateway, her cane planted in the gravel, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then, "My sister-in-law loved this place. It killed her spirit to watch it die. You have brought it back." Her gaze swiveled to Helena. "Why?" "Because I needed something to care for that would not mock me," Helena said honestly. The Dowager's thin lips curved, not a smile but the memory of one. "Well, we shall see how you manage the dinner party I have arranged for Christmas Eve. The county will be here." That dinner party became the crucible. The house filled with neighbors. Sir Martin, of course, with his insinuating smile. Lord and Lady Harrowby, the latter a woman whose envy curdled into spite, and half a dozen others. The meal began with stiff politeness. Then Lady Harrowby, after too much wine, remarked loudly, "I do so admire a duchess who gardens. So very rustic. But tell me, Your Grace, was it not a wager that inspired your efforts? My husband says it was the talk of the season." 100 guineas. You must be so proud to have proven the gentleman wrong." The table froze. The Duke's face turned to granite. The Dowager's eyes narrowed. Helena felt the humiliation wash over her like ice water, but she set down her fork with a soft clink. "You are misinformed, Lady Harrowby," Helena said. "The garden was a gift from my husband. What others wagered on is their own foolishness. I have never considered my labor a game, and I do not now." She rose. "Pray, excuse me. I find I am fatigued." She left the room, her heart hammering but her gait steady. Behind her she heard the Dowager's voice, sharp as a lash. "Julian, you will explain this to me. Now." Helena went to her chamber and took out a small valise. She had written to a cousin in York, a widow who would take her in. She would stay for Christmas Day for the servants, for the tenants who depended on the garden's bounty, and then she would leave. She would not be a wager. She would not be a joke. The Duke could have his heir from someone else. She would annul the marriage on grounds of cruelty and public humiliation if she must. She would rather be poor than a pawn. Downstairs, the Duke sat in his chair, his aunt's words burning in his ears. "You are a greater fool than your father, Julian. That woman has more worth in her smallest finger than you have in your entire body, and you have thrown it away for a wager at a club. You disgust me." He did not defend himself. He could not. All he could see was Helena's back as she left the dinner, the quiet devastation in her eyes that she had hidden from everyone but him. He had done that. He had broken something precious, and he did not know if it could ever be mended. Christmas Eve dawned with a snowstorm that howled across the Yorkshire moors like a banshee. By midday the roads were impassable, and the cart bringing the ordered provisions from London, the hams, the spices, the confectioner's sugar, was stranded in a drift 20 miles away. Mrs. Bridges came to Helena in a panic. "Your Grace, the feast is ruined. We have nothing but dry goods. The guests will expect a proper Christmas dinner, and we cannot feed them on bread and apologies." Helena listened calmly. "What of the garden stores?" "The garden stores are for the tenants, Your Grace, and for the household's winter. If we use them for the feast, there will be nothing left for January." "There will be enough," Helena said. "Bring me the inventory." She led the kitchen effort herself. From the cellar came baskets of potatoes, carrots, onions, and squash. From the still room, jars of preserved plums and pickled vegetables. The glasshouse provided fresh lettuce and herbs. Mrs. Bridges, her despair transformed to zeal, produced a meal that no London caterer could surpass. Roasted root vegetables with rosemary, a soup of pumpkin and sage, braised beef with a sauce of the Duchess's own herb vinegar, and for dessert, a pudding studded with dried apples and honey from the hive Helena had established in a sheltered corner of the garden. The bread was fresh, the butter plentiful. The table, when laid, groaned with abundance. The guests, trapped by the storm, gathered in the great hall. The Dowager Duchess watched Helena direct the servants, her expression unreadable. The Duke stood by the hearth, silent, his eyes following his wife's every movement. When the meal was served, he took his seat at the head of the table, Helena at the foot. The first bite of the soup silenced all conversation. It was extraordinary. Lord Harrowby, a man who had laughed at the wager, set down his spoon and said, "This is the finest Christmas dinner I have eaten in a decade. My compliments to your cook, Ashford." The Duke cleared his throat. "The compliments belong to my wife. Every dish you eat tonight, every vegetable, every herb comes from the garden she cultivated with her own hands, the garden I gave her as a jest." He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. The room fell utterly still. "I made a wager that she would fail. I was wrong. She did not fail. She saved this household tonight, and I stand before you as a man humbled, more than humbled, ashamed. And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life, because I have injured the finest person I have ever known." He looked down the table at Helena. "You told me the garden was a gift, but you were the gift, Helena, and I threw you away before I understood your worth. I do not ask your forgiveness. I have no right. But I want every soul in this room to know that the Duchess of Ashford fed this estate tonight, and I am prouder of her than of any title or land I will ever possess." The Dowager Duchess raised her glass. To the Duchess of Ashford. The others echoed, some reluctantly, some with genuine warmth. Sir Martin did not raise his. His face was a mask of sour defeat. Helena rose. She walked to the Duke, her steps measured. "I packed my valise this afternoon. I intended to leave on Boxing Day. I still may." Her voice was clear, carrying to every corner. "But you spoke the truth before these people. That is not nothing. It is not forgiveness, but it is a beginning." He took her hand, not with the grip of ownership, but with the gentleness of a man holding something infinitely fragile. "I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you if you will let me. The garden is yours in truth and in law forever. I will have the papers drawn up. And if you stay, I will never wager on anything again, because the only thing I value cannot be wagered." Outside, the snow fell in thick, silent curtains, burying the old wounds under a clean, cold blanket. The garden slept beneath its mulch, the seeds of spring waiting in the dark. Helena looked at the man before her, at the cracks in his pride, at the raw, unpolished hope in his eyes. She did not say she loved him, not yet. But she took his hand and led him to the window where the glass house glowed faintly in the storm. "The winter lettuce will be ready by New Year," she said. "If you wish, you may help me harvest it." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. "I would like that more than anything." And in the hush of that snowbound Christmas, with the household fed and the garden resting, the Duke of Ashford began to learn what his wife had always known, that even the most barren ground can bloom again, if tended with patience, dignity, and a stubborn, unkillable hope.